Hello everyone, I'm Donelle McAdams and we're here for our live video to show off the new winter collection templates. We're going to be doing a project called Hexagon Table Topper. You can see part of it here in the screen. I'll move it a little bit so that you can see some of the bottom. And if you want to zoom in right down here, we can see that in this particular one we have actually used the glitter. So that's going to be called our peaker fabric. And so I'm going to be talking about that. We're going to go through the pattern. And I hope that somewhere you will be able to learn something new. Even if you don't stitch this project afterwards, I think you'll learn something new. So if you've not gotten the handout yet, I had a little trouble uploading it to my website. So as soon as I get finished here, I will do that. And that's SewBizMarian.com, and I believe it's probably on the Facebook page in the files. It's called Hexagon Table Topper, and so you will have the full information of what supplies you need and photos to show you exactly how to get everything set up. So I'm going to go over here to the sewing machine now, and we will get started. So the first thing I want to show you is the fabric that was used in the sample and how you would cut your triangles. Now I'm not going to actually cut the triangles, but I want to show you how that would be done. So if I need 6 triangles, this here is a 13-inch strip. My pattern is going to be simply the Creative Grids triangle. Now you can use any one that you want, but it needs to be 12.5. It needs to be a 60-degree triangle, and I find the one by Creative Grids is the one that seems to work the best. So when you're lining this up, you're only going to want to use one layer of fabric. So I've got this doubled here, and I'm going to actually open this up so that you can see that I'm going to have just one. Now I would be over on my cutting mat doing this, but I think for this you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find something on my fabric. If I'm using a fabric that has got designs like this, I'm going to find something on my fabric that I want to use every single time. And in this case, I'm going to go right to the center of that little, what was a completed circle there, and I'm going to line that up and get it straight across at the bottom so it comes right down the center of those designs. Now you may be using a different type of fabric. The sample I'm going to be stitching on today is going to be a solid. So in that case, it's really not going to matter. But on this one, I did line this up so that when we stitch it all together, this is going to come together as a pattern. And if your fabric doesn't matter, you can cut 2 at a time. If it does, you're going to go this way. Now in some cases, and this is all explained in the pattern, you're going to use the Hexagon Table Topper by SewBiz, and this is all explained in the pattern. But I could cut this out just like this, and then I could simply use that edge and come around and cut another one going like this. Now that's only if your pattern is such that you do not have like a one-way direction. Because down here in this section I have that, so everything is fine. So I could use this cut line. I could just maybe move over a little bit and line that up. So you're going to need to have 6 of these. You need 6 of the 12.5 inch tall. This is your 12.5 inch. The 12.5 inch tall 60-degree triangles. So what I'm going to do is show you the little hints on how to put those together. So we're going to assume that we've got those all cut out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the triangle, and if you're using the Creative Grids, it's going to give you a flat edge right up here at the top. That's the only one that's going to be flat. but it's going to make it so you can easily put them together when you go to construct the actual 6 pieces. So I'm going to be doing a border for our sample that is of this color. And I did choose this just simply for videoing it because it makes it easier. If I pad a pattern, you really can't see anything. So what I've done is, and again in the instruction it explains, this was 45-inch fabric that I have cut 6 inches wide, and then I simply cut it in half. Now to do the TempLee quilting on a light colored fabric, it's best to actually back with an interfacing. Now I like to use the Fusi-Knit, the fusible that is kind of a knit that's going to go on that back, because it doesn't change the feeling. It still has the nice drape of the fabric. So I have fused that on the back. Now a little hint about this, like I said, you're going to learn something all the time. This shrinks. So what I do is I take about 3 yards of it at a time, and I put it in a little bit warmer than warm. It's almost hot. But I put it in that hot water, and then I just simply let it set for about 20 minutes, and I take it out, and I just kind of let it drip dry over the shower rod, or if it's summer, you can set it out over the clothesline or whatever. You don't want to do anything like, wring it to death. You just kind of want to let it drip dry. So I squeeze as much water as I can out of it. So then that way I've got 3 yards that are ready to go all the time, because you definitely want to pre-shrink that. So if you've never heard that, that stuff does shrink up, and you do want to pre-shrink it. We do a lot of t-shirt quilts, my daughter and I do, and we make sure that we've got 6 to 8 yards of that stuff pre-shrunk in it at any time so we can use it. So now what I'm going to do after I fuse that on, I am going to, so this is about 22 inches by 6 inches wide by 22 inches long. I'm simply going to find the center. And so I'm just going to take a little pen, and I'm going to mark it there in the center so I know where that's at. And I'm going to pull this down, and I've got a line right there that I can straighten that up with. And I'm just going to find the center. Now you could fold it. I can pretty much eyeball this. But I'm going to find the center so that I can lay that together. So I'm going to take this and turn it now. I've got those 2 edges together. I've got my machine threaded, and I want you to know I'm using an 80 weight thread at this point. So I have a very fine thread on there. And the reason I'm pointing this out is when you're doing quilting over seams, it's best if you have 60 or 80 weight thread that you have pieced with. And the reason for that is that finer thread is going to give you a finer seam, because the thread, it's going to lay flatter. Your seam is going to lay flatter. So I'm using a 1/4 inch seam. I have reduced my stitch length to 2.0. You don't want to do any stretching. I like to stop with my needle down, so I'm going to set my machine that way. And I'm using a 1/4 inch piecing foot. And the thing that I find most is when people use 1/4 inch piecing feet, they tend to do a bigger seam than they intend to, because they pull their fabric out away from where the edge of the foot is. Keep it right on the edge. When I get to the end here, I'm simply going to cut that. And we're going to scoot over here to the iron, and I'm going to press this. Now when I press this, obviously I'm using a white fabric here. I want to make sure my iron is good and clean. And I will tell you, the easy way to clean off your iron, no matter what kind of gunk is on there, is a bounce or similar dryer sheet. Not the foam ones, but a bounce or similar. And I put it on a stack of paper towels. And I'm just going to run my iron on that paper towel. Now I cleaned it right before, so you might not see a whole lot come off on that. But this will even put the glide back on your iron. So if you've got a problem with an iron that's got a little bit of, let's just say, grunge on the bottom, we want to make sure that we get that off. So that's an easy way to do that. Anytime you're working with quilting pieces, it's best to do what we call set our seam. So the same way that it came off of the sewing machine, we're just going to set that seam. And in this case, I don't want that shadowing through like that. So I want to press my seam. In this case, it's also to the dark side, which we have often heard. So this is going to end up being my border. So I'm pressing that to that side. I'm going to take this, and you'll notice that I'm using my Steady Betty, so that keeps my bias from doing anything. If you have questions, you know that you can type them in. I have my daughter here watching, so she can tell me if you have a question. So if you have a question while I'm pressing this, now would be a time to go for it. So I'm going to do the same thing on this second one. It just makes your threads fit right together, mesh together. And then when I do this, I'm simply going to put the side down first that I'm going to be pressing the seam away from. Give me some thumbs up if we got some good volume and whatever. I don't want to do this and you're having a hard time hearing. I assume you would let me know.
They would like to know, what is a Steady Betty and where can you get one?
Okay. A Steady Betty is a foam-like pressing surface. When I first started with mine, I just had a 12 by 12. And I found out that the one that's 24 by 12 served me a lot better. Now in this case, you think, oh, it's foam, you can't iron on that. Yes, you can. So here's my little 12 by 12 that I started with. I guess this was even a little bit bigger than 24 by 12. So they make them the full size of your ironing board, but I found that I can get along just with this size. And what it does is when I'm pressing, this edge over here is cut on the bias, which means it will stretch. But on a Steady Betty, it's not going anywhere because it connects right down there with that foam, so it doesn't stretch. So you don't see any of those edges stretching out. So great question. I know they're available at your local quilt store. If not, ask for them, and you can show them what they do if they're not familiar with that. Now what I'm going to be doing with this is I just removed my pressing mat so that I can cut these so that it is a complete triangle. So I've got it, there we go. I've got to find out what I did with my triangle. So I'm simply going to take this and I'm going to make it so it's even on the bottom edge. And I'm going to cut it right along that straight edge there. So this edge should be even, and this edge. Now you could just use a regular long ruler, because anytime you've already got this set up, you could go just like this and it would do the same thing. So it doesn't matter. Now you know why I needed that longer space out of there, because I'm going to be cutting that off. I'm simply going to turn it around. You would be making 6 of these. I'm only doing 2. Well, that'd have been great. I almost picked up my iron as if I was going to iron right on my mat. You cannot do that. This board I'm working on here is on top of my cabinet that is adjustable in height. It actually, you can probably see this space right there. That's where my sewing machine could fit into. I've got a full-size cutting mat, and since I've got another place for my sewing machine, I usually just use this as a cutting board.
While you're cutting your other one, they're wondering, they found it on the Sew Biz page, your Hexagon table topper. Do you remember, is that pattern 104?
It should be, I believe so, yes.
So Barb, you have found the correct one. It is SB 104.
So what I'm going to do here is get this completely. Again, I'm only doing 2 because that's all I really need. Remember, this bottom has the interfacing underneath it, only because I'm using a picker fabric that's going to shadow through if I don't.
Remind us again, we've had a couple questions. What was that you fused to the back?
I used Fusa-Knit. You can use any kind of a lightweight interfacing, but I like the knit because this fabric still has the same feel when it's finished. It's not stiff, so it's going to be easy to conform to what I'm doing. So I'm going to set this back up in case I need to iron or press again. The difference, you noticed I said iron or press because a lot of times in quilting we are simply pressing. We're not ironing. Ironing is back and forth and pressing is an up and down motion. So what I'm doing right here is I'm getting these two seams to line up. I'm going to take my straight pin and put that on this side so I know I've got that held in place. I will be stitching from the top to the bottom, so these will probably lay correctly, but just in case they don't. And you notice these pins might look a little different to you. They kind of have a rubberized tip to them, so they're easy to grasp, and they're a little bit longer than just the ones with the ball on the top. And one of the reasons I like them is they are quilting pins, but they're finer. They're not nearly as thick as many quilting pins have been. So this I talked about before, where that square end there matches up. It's going to reduce the bulk when we end up putting this all together. And I want to tell you a little bit, if you look at this, it's like, look at that. It's just a little bit, whoa, what happened to that? We're not going to worry about it, but whenever you have something that looks a little bit bigger from one side to the other, or what you're meeting up, you always put the one that has this extra on the bottom. We call it baggy bottoms. I've got a little bit of difference right down here, but when I put this together, I'm not going to have any issue because my feed teeth are going to work that extra fabric in. So it will work with us to get that accomplished. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you what is called a starter piece. And I had my little piece laying here somewhere. I'll find it real quickly. Because some of you have experienced this and you know exactly what I'm talking about. So when you start to stitch, that machine kind of swallows up some of your fabric. It gets caught down into the machine and you kind of have to start again. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm just taking a piece of fabric. You can see it's not anything perfect or anything that's of any particular shape. I just pulled a little scrap from over here at the side, and I actually just start stitching on that. And then I bring my fabric in, and because I already have a seam going, it just goes right on through. And I will just use this over and over and over because it's going to end up getting cut off after I'm finished. So I'm doing 1/4 inch here. Remember I said I told my needle to be down, so that acts as like a third hand for me. I don't even have to worry about it. And I'm keeping an eye on this underneath here, and believe it or not, it's all working in just because my feed teeth are helping me do that. So I'll be able to show that to you here in a second. So some of you probably are like, man, she's like my home ec teacher. Well, yes, I was a home ec teacher in a former life. And I can tell you that once you learn these little hints and you make them a part of your routine, it's going to make your sewing go a lot more successfully without a lot of effort. So as you can see right down here, I'm almost to the end. When I get there, I'm just touching that cutter. And I will show you on the other side here that it worked that all in. You don't see any puckering. Now we're going to go back over here. Well, first of all, I got to cut off my little starting block. So I just cut that right off of there. And we're going to go over here to the pressing mat so I can press it, because we're actually going to use this piece in a little bit. So I'm going to set this off. Remember I said what I'm doing is I am setting that seam, and that also helps that extra that I was working in. And then I'm going to decide, am I going to turn that seam left or am I going to turn it right? Well, I'm going to just go this way on that. And look how that matched up down there before I even press anymore. Simply by putting that little pin in there and helping it in place. So I pull this up and put this back to the side like that. I want to get a good seam that is pressed to one side, but I don't want any pleats or creases. So that's why I hold it this way and press it that way. So that's the way that you would do this. Now what you're going to do is you will have 6 of these. We would connect another one either on this side or that side, and that would be half of our hexagon mat. So we would connect 3 to make half, and then 3 to make the other half, and then the long seam is going to get stitched right down through the middle. So you want to keep your seams going the same way all the way around, and then when we're finished, I'll show you in a few minutes when I get the other one out. When we're finished with that, we are actually going to kind of fan out that seam that seam that will be right here in the middle circle. So you can see how this is done, and I'm going to lay this aside until a little bit later because we're getting ready now to do some of our quilting. So what I'm going to do first is show you the templates. So in the winter collection, it looks like I'm going to have to go find a couple of them. I had them all here, but I've got the heart, the snowflake, and I also have, it got a little steamed up with the iron. I also have here the star, and so I need to find for you, real quickly I'll go look for this. Here is the other one we're going to use today. My template's not cloudy, it just got steamed up by the iron. And so that mat is holding a little bit of that steam. This is what the pattern looks like. I found that while I was over there. So those of you that didn't see that, this is what your instructions will look like when you get those. And it's 7 pages. This first page tells you what you're going to be needing, and then we have the instructions on how you're going to do it. So do we have any comments or questions while I'm getting my machine ready here? This is the other template, and I'm going to show you how to use this one first because it's a wreath. And it's also one that I did not use in the project. Sometimes it's hard to work all of the templates in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move over here to my machine, and I'm going to get some thread, and I'm going to talk through what I'm doing. So I'm going to be using a colored thread for this so that you can see it. So I'm going to put in a bobbin. Now I want to show you this. This is a cute little thing that they have now that allows you to put your bobbin that matches your thread. So you stick this little piece through the center here, and I don't remember exactly what they're called, but I know they're on my website. Some of you may already have some of these. And you simply put it right in there. So it keeps everything nice and together. So I'm going to put my bobbin in first.
As you're doing that, there's been a question from Sandy. Is Winter Templates the name of the set you just showed?
Winter Collection.
Winter Collection.
Winter Collection. Now, when I was piecing this, I would normally have pieced, when I piece with that 60 or 80 weight thread, I use a size 70 needle, just a 70 universal needle. But I went ahead so I didn't have to change all that, and I knew I was only going to sew a couple seams. And I put in my 90 top stitch needle. Now I'm finding that I really like the 90 top stitch chrome needles for doing regular 40 or 50 weight thread, which is what I'm going to use today. Now I am using a rayon thread, a pretty thread here, but it is a 40 weight. And so I have a 90 top stitch chrome already in my machine, so I wouldn't have to change it. I would not recommend stitching with a 90 top stitch for piecing with 60 or 80 weight thread. Now I'm going to go ahead and thread my needle, pull it out so that thread is long enough. I like to have a little bit longer screwdriver here, so I'm going to go ahead and take my ankle and foot off. And I'm going to look for my, here it is, right there. Look for my foot. This is a Westalee foot. It's a low shank because the machine I'm using requires a low shank. And I thought, well, I should set up a couple machines so I don't have to go through all this. But you know what? I know that some of you have questions on how to set your machine up. So I wanted to answer those. So the first thing I'm going to do on mine is I am going to, you probably heard that click. I'm going to lower the feed teeth and I'm going to get my glider. Now this is a grid glider. Some of you may have seen the new gliders that Sew Steady has. Some of you may have not seen it. But this grid glider is cut out with a large hole here, so I can actually use this all the time. I could have had this on here when I was piecing. I'm going to peel back. One of the corners has a spot that, always the last one of course. I'm going to peel back this back, so I take that backing off, and I'm going to just save that to put it back on. Now mine is not a brand new one, but I will tell you that it clings just like it was. And the reason for that is you can wash these, or rinse them I should say, in warm water. So the back of this might collect something on it so it won't cling as well, but you can rinse it in warm water. But I recently found out, because sometimes I don't have the time to wait for my grid glider to dry, I used to use a lint roller. And it works just as well. So you're just going to get a lint roller. Everyone should have one in their sewing room anyway. And you're going to put that right behind it. Or you're going to roll it off on the back of that. So this is lined up now. Right here is center needle position. And right from the sides here I have lines on my plate that I've lined that up. So if I wanted to use this for 1/4 inch with just my regular foot on, I could. Now what I'm going to do here is, believe it or not, this design does not require any kind of markings, but I do need my thumbtack. It's on that pink reel right there. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my thumbtack, and wherever I want the center, I'm just bringing it up from the back. Now if I knew that I had to have it in an exact spot, I would put it down from the front. But this particular design, this template makes a wreath. And so I am going to be able to use the etchings on the template to see where things need to line up. So what I got to do, I got a little anxious there. What I got to do first is get my height set, and I'm going to show you the easy way to do that. If you will put your foot on but leave it loose. Are they able to see that loose like that? Great. Okay, so we're going to leave this loose. And then all I'm going to do is touch my button or lower my presser bar so that it puts that that foot right down on the fabric. And so it will pretty much adjust where it needs to go. So once it's down like that, just go ahead and tighten that up. Now before we actually get started with it, we want to put the thread through. Now in a little bit I'm going to show you how I secure my thread, but right now I'm not. So I'm going to put that through there, and I'm simply going to test it. Well, I can see that mine needs to go down a little bit farther. So I'm going to loosen this, and I'm going to push it down just a smidge. And let me tell you, a smidge is like the thickness of a sheet of paper. That will make a difference. So if your machine is skipping stitches or you need to change that, you're going to want to look in your manual and see how you can do that easily so that you can prevent having to skip stitches. So right now it's looking better. It looks like I need to maybe adjust my tension just a bit. If your thread is showing from the bottom to the top, in other words, your bobbin thread shows on the top, you want to lower that top tension because it's pulling too much to the top. The other thing I'm going to tell you to do is take your speed down to medium, and then I turn my foot pedal around and I use it from the back so that I can get more even stitches. That's as fast as my machine is going to go, and since my foot pedal is turned around to the back, I can completely press it to the floor, and that way I don't have to think anymore about how hard to put down the pressure on my foot pedal. So I got that tension adjusted, I've got the foot adjusted to the right height, and so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just simply cut this thread and go to my actual design. So I'm going to come in here and I want to secure my thread right where I need to begin. So I'm going to pull this up to that point. I'm going to put my needle down, my needle up, and bring up my foot. Now, I'm going to move my template totally out of the way so you can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to take my bobbin thread and pull that out. And I'm going to get my curved needle and a straight pin. So there's my straight pin, and here's my curved needle. Now the first step to a knot, and I know some of you have seen this, maybe some of you have seen it several times, but you probably could always use a review. The first step to a knot is a loop. So I make that loop, I put my needle or my straight pin through that loop as if it was like a lasso. And I'm going to pull this away so that you can see it. And all I'm going to do is put the point or the tip of that straight pin right down in where that bobbin thread came out. And because I'm underneath my foot and that's where my feed teeth and everything are, I can actually stab that right into that fabric. And so now you'll see that I can control this point. Oops, it moved. There we go. I can control this point so that I can pull that knot right down to the surface of my fabric. I think you can see that. I'm going to trim the other ends so that I have maybe like 8 or 10 inches left. And I'm going to take the curved needle and I'm going to put the eye of that in my mouth. So I get saliva in there because now that saliva acts as a magnet and pulls those threads right through that opening. It makes it a lot easier to thread your needle. Usually I hear people say, well, I've been doing it wrong all my life. And I find that that's true because if you wet your threads, you're just making them expand. So I'm coming to that same insertion spot and I'm just turning my curved needle to the side and bringing out the end of it about 1.5 inches away from where I started. And so if you watch this knot here, I'm going to release this straight pin, and when I pull on this thread, that knot goes right down in. So I'm going to set my foot down and put my needle right back in the spot where it came out. Now, a little trick to this is when you're going to clip this off, if you will just kind of push back on your fabric a little bit so you get that little kind of a wrinkle there, then trim your thread. When you let go of it, it's underneath there. It's completely hidden. So you've hidden the tails. And I'm only going to do that once today, so when I start some of the other designs, because they're just samples and not actual projects, I won't be knotting that. So what I'm going to be able to do now is I'm just going to put my template.
I think you just changed Terry's life. She says that she loves that needle threading trick.
Okay, well that's great. I'm glad to help. So what I'm going to do is I'm raising it. The point is still in there, but I'm raising the foot so I can get my little template right back into where I need it to be and put it right back on that thumbtack. So Terry, I'm glad that was good for you. I'm sure there's others out there that liked it too. So what I'm going to do is now come back to A. There's an A right here on that template. And I am going to be stitching around this edge. I will never stitch on this inside edge. I stitch around this edge and over to B. So the A is here, the B is here. Right here I have a B1. B1 is where I will stop when I start at A. And then I will rotate and I will stitch all the way back up to A and stop at A1 right here. So when I start at A, I stop at B1. When I start at B, I stop at A1. But there's a little backtracking in between there. So we're going to go around here to this spot, back to B, and back to B1 and stop. We move to the next spot. We go to B1, around, back, and stop at A1. You can see the lines starting to line up. Move to the next line, stitch to B1, past A1, back to A, stop back at A1. Stitch past A1, stitch past B1, back to B, back to A1 and stop. B1. Stop at A1. Stitch back to B. So each time I'm doing this, I have lines on here, and I'm going to come back to A1 and stop, but I want you to see by turning this that I've got those lines or etchings that are on your template lined up with previous stitchings. Now you can see these easily, and you're probably thinking, well, why are those over there? Well, when we get completely back around, they are going to make it so it's easier for us to line up and make sure we get back to where we started. So I'm going to just keep going here because I want you to be able to see what this looks like. And you kind of get into a routine of this because, believe it or not, that muscle memory theory does really work. Now I'm rotating it again so you can see how I'm coming around here. Remember, this is the template that we did not use in this project, but I know you're going to love it and you're going to want to know how to use it, especially since it came in this winter collection.
And remind us again, it's called, this template set is called what?
The winter collection.
The winter collection.
We called it the winter collection because of the fact that, like, we're using a heart, and that, you know, I started to say Thanksgiving, but I meant to say Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day is still part of winter, and so that way we just kind of have a generic name. Now see how this is developing, and it's always, I was just at a show this weekend in Novi, Michigan, and when I was doing this, I think I had some people almost hypnotized when I got around this, and they absolutely could not believe that I didn't have any lines to measure up with except for what's on the template. Now I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. So as I start to come around here, I've got this template in the right place ready to go, and look over here. This is matching up. That means when we get there, we're not going to have like a little tiny one that doesn't fit or too big of a one. Now I'm going to rotate this clear around because I want you to see this is going to be my last one. And so I could line it up right here on that etching. That's where it's supposed to be. But I'm going to use my spacing gauge to make sure I've got just exactly 1/4 of an inch. Because I'm going to stitch this so you can see it, even though it's a little bit more uncoordinated for me, so that I can come back here and that's where I would end. So when I end this, I'm going to bring my needle up, raise up my foot, and I'm going to simply pull these threads out. And in many cases, you can just pull on this back thread, and that will get a hold of that, and even just by pulling with tweezers, that whole thread will come to the back. So you can see it's coming right back through there, so it's not on the front. So now I would just simply tie that in a knot, and again, bury those tails. But that's what that design looks like. Easy to do, fun to do, and yet I didn't use it in this particular project. So that is the Spinifex, oh nope, Circles on Quilts Wreath 5. Some of you may already have this, but Circles on Quilts Wreath 5 is what we chose to put into this particular set. So I'm going to lay that aside now, and I am going to get my piece to show you how we are going to work with the star template. So the star template is one that looks like an overgrown V maybe. And I have already pieced this particular section together. So you can see I have my 6 pieces here. And I'm going to need a thumbtack to come up through the center. Now, if you look at that center, that would be really difficult to get any kind of stitching through. There's a ton of layers there. But I can get my thumbtack through that. So I'm going to pull this over, and I'm going to go through to the back. So you can see it comes up right there. Now, if you have trouble, finding that again, you could actually mark that, but I know that hole is going to remain there, and you can see it right there. So now I'm just going to come up from the bottom right through that center. Now, if it's a little bit off, it's going to make your star off. So you want to take the time to get it exactly in that center. And it's surprising. There we go. It's surprising the difference it will make. Now, I'm not ready. Whoa, that's not right either. Some of you are glad to see that I'm struggling with that too, because you probably struggle a little bit. So I'm going to use...
You got a couple hearts on that one.
Yeah. So I'm going to use the table as my strong piece, and now I got it straight there. So I do use my Sew Steady table when I'm working with this. If you don't have one, you just need to talk to somebody that does, because you're going to find out that you're going to love it if you get one. Get the Wish table. It's the one that has the drawer for all your little extra accessories and has the circle sewing features, although we're not using any of that today. Now, this is going to be a little different for some of you, and this is probably something you're going to need to invest in. And this is a 6-point crosshair grid. And the 6-point crosshair grid has 6 divisions. It wouldn't really make a whole lot of sense for me to do an 8-point star on a hexagon project. So when you get your instructions, you're going to notice that these fit right on the seam lines that are already there. So I really don't need to draw them again. However, I'm going to, because I want you to see the visual so that you can see where they are. So I'm going to go ahead and draw right on those seam lines. Now I'm using a Fixon pen, or it's actually a Fixon marker because it has the felt tip like. And I will tell you that they've taken a bad rap, any of the Fixon markers, but the solution to getting those lines so that they will come off is to pre-treat your fabric by pressing it with Best Press. So Megan, can you hand me my Mr. bottle right there? Thank you. So this is my Mr. bottle that has Best Press in it. And I would spray the best press on my fabric first. I would press it. I would spray it again, and I would press it again. And the reason for that is that creates a barrier so your ink is never really getting into your fabric. So when you're finished, you would be able to press those lines right off, and they're not going to come back in the cold. So, and they will not ghost. So that's the way that you can treat your fabric so that that doesn't happen. So now what I need to do, if you have any questions, throw them on there so I can answer them. Now what I need to do is I need to mark the lines that will be straight down between what's already there. So on my template, there are etchings. I'm going to look at that one and line it up with a previously drawn line. I'm going to look at this one. You'll notice I'm using my thumbtack to hold everything pretty much in place. And so this time, I'm going to put an orange line on here. Uh-oh, there's one you can't quite see. There we go. So I have two lines that I can work with. So I'm going to take my star pattern, and I'm going to be doing this star at 7 and 9, but I want to check my directions real quick to make sure I've got the right numbers, because I wouldn't want to do it incorrectly. So if you've already downloaded this, we are on diagram 3, and it looks like, ooh, I'm glad I checked. We're doing it at 5 inches and 7 inches. No, it's 7 and 9. Okay. So I'm coming out here and I'm putting the C right on the line that is between, because I want my points of my stars to finish on my seam. So I'm lining that up, I'm setting the foot down, and I'm going to turn this so you can see it real easily. What I'm doing with this is I start out here and I bring this right down so that my line is in the middle of my foot, and I think you can see that. And that's where I set my needle down into that. And so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to stitch to the red line or orange line, and I'm going to stitch back out to the green line.
Thanks, Bonnie, for your comment. We also have a question. Where did we get the download for those of them that are just tuning in?
It will be on my website at sewbizmarian.com, and it will also be on the Sew Study Facebook page and on their website, I believe. Sew Study is the name on both Facebook and on the website. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to the center and out to the green line. I simply rotate this so this C is back on center and out to the green line. So I just noticed in my instructions that I do have a mistake there. I will get it corrected. So if you already have yours or you get one before I get it corrected, it's 7 inches and 9 inches, not 5 and 7. So as you can see, now this is not hard at all, but as you can see, we are just simply stopping so our points are in our seam line. Now this particular template can also work on an 8 point, the same way as I'm doing it here. Now this is the last one. And this is one that we want to match up. So I'm going to get my spacing gauge. If you've not seen a spacing gauge, this is what it is. And I am going to line this up and stitch to the center. I'm going to rotate it mainly for your benefit, because I want you to see that when I'm down there in the center, I can do whatever I need to do. And I need to get right back to this point right there. So I am going to set this so my flat side is to the flat side of my template. I'm not putting it like that. I'm putting it right like this, and that way I will get right back to where I started. Now I'm going to pull this out. I can secure those threads later. I'm going to give this a cut and this one a cut underneath. And now we're going to do another star, and this other star is going to be the one that is at 9. So I'm going to be doing the same thing. Just so you guys noticed, I just dropped that on the floor, but because I've got one of these lanyards on it, I don't have to worry. I can still pick it up. But this one is going to be at the 9. So I've got a 6, 7, 8, and clear up to 12. So again, remember my center line is going on the space that doesn't have a seam. In my case, I've made it so that it's a red color. And I'm going to start out here, putting that foot down right against my template so that my needle sets right in the seam line. I want to get this out of the way, and I want to make sure that I don't get to going so that I forget about where I need to stop and I fall off my template. That would not be a good thing. I'm going to get this over and out of the way. Since I didn't secure them, I sure don't want to wrap them up in a seam. I'm bringing this around. C is still on my center. I'm stitching in and I'm stitching out. Rotate. Line up that center line there. It makes it so easy to make these stars. And remember, there's no way I could have really done anything in that center with this stitch because I couldn't have gotten over it. But you'll notice I'm not having any problem at all going over my seams because I have stitched with 60, actually I stitched with 80 weight thread. That's what I usually use. So I stop in that seam line, I come back, this is the one I have to match up. I find it easiest to stitch to the center on this because then I can rotate this to what I need it to be. In a perfect world, it shouldn't have to be changed, but you know, we're not always living in a perfect world and we want those to line up. So again, I'm going to raise up my needle and raise my foot. Sounds like we might have a question.
We do have a few questions. So, Princess Cindy would like to know, would you put a cap on that? Because she's afraid she would poke herself with that tack.
It's barely sticking up, and nothing I can put on there is going to do anything to it. Now, if you wanted to put like a pin more on there, but put it on loose, you could. But that is so, I mean, that's not even a 1/16 of an inch there. Okay. You might, if you really felt uncomfortable with it, you might, find something you want to put there.
Also, we've got a few of you that've got to log off because you've got other things going on. We're glad you could come. This video will be stored on both the Sew Biz page as well as the Sew Steady page.
Right. And we wanted you to know that from the standpoint that we know some of you have to go, but this is going to continue, and you can always come back and see it. We chose to do it this way because that way we could get it all done in one session. So it will be archived. So what I want to do is I'm going to have Megan hand me my iron, because what I want to show you is just how much nicer it looks after we get those lines off of there. Now, I would not recommend, I'm just going to do this real quickly, I certainly would not recommend ironing on your Sew Steady table.
It's not on. Oh, yeah, it is.
So I'd have to work just a little bit longer, and you can see that that comes out, but I don't want to have that on my Sew Steady table. Why don't you give me my little 12-inch pressing mat over there, and I can do that. I'm going to lift the corner of that up, and I'll just set this on here, and that way we won't hurt anything. So the heat will take that right out. And of course, then it looks a whole lot nicer. So that's what that one's going to look like. And now we're going to do snowflakes. So what I'm going to have you do is imagine with me that I've already put my border on here. I have on that piece that we're going to use later, but I haven't put it on this piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to measure 1/4 inch, and I'm just going to draw a line. So what I will have here is where my seam line would be, where that border stitches onto it. And this is my 12.5 inch centering ruler. I use it all the time. And I just want you to see the difference in it is we have regular numbers on one side. You can see I'm marking something here for something a little bit later that we're going to do. We have it so it's right down the center so we can use it at 1 inch. And then we have these little lines over on this side, plus the centering part is there's a 0 in the middle and it goes out either way. So when I get this lined up, I am going to come right from my center. This is actually center right here. All of that's in the instructions. And I'm just going to line that up, and I'm going to give myself just a little kind of a hash mark there so that I know where I'm at. And in this case, I need to measure up from the seam line 1/4 inch, or excuse me, 4 inches. So that's where my center is to do my snowflake. Now on the snowflake, I don't need any tack or pen or anything like that. So I'm going to find my snowflake here and show you that when we do this, you need to pay attention to your templates and understand how they work. So this template here, let's see if I can find a piece that I can put this on so you can see it a little bit better. So here's a piece of black paper. So when you look at this template, we have several places that we can hook into to get different sizes. Now when you get it, you get a long bar like this. That's what we're going to use first. So the puzzle piece holds in place, and I've got this so it's at 5.5. Now we're not going to use an 11.5, but if we did, we have the other little small piece that we can hook in right there. When we go to the 7.5, I'm going to be able to just pull this right out, and I want you to notice that there are lines here that line up with the etchings on the side. So to get this in the 7.5, I'm going to line up those lines and simply use my tape. Now I like to use R&K Perfection tape, and this is the way it comes. And the reason I like it, first of all, it's an embroidery tape, so you can use it for your in-the-hoop embroidery things. But it's it's going to stay on there. I've tried other things. I've tried to use painter's tape, washi tape, all different kinds of things, and they just don't work as well. This works perfectly. So I need to, again, use my crosshair grid. So I'm going to mark on here, and I want you to notice that when I set this in place, even though I don't need a thumbtack in there, I am going to line up the etchings, and again I'm going to use 2 colors. So on this one I'm going to use my diagonals as my red or my orange. I'm going to make my little mark in the center so it's a little heavier. And I'm simply going to rotate again like I did before. Where are we at? There we go. And I'm going to set that in place. And this time I'm going to use my green. Now the green ones in my case are going to be my 5.5. Because if I used them as my 7.5, they would come out into my border, and I don't want that to happen. So when it says 5.5, that doesn't mean from here to here it's 5.5. It means if I did 2 of them, it's 5.5. So I'm going to pull this in. You might want to get a little bit closer there with the camera. And I'm going to set that foot down right in the center. I'm going to put my needle down, my needle up, and my foot up. And then this is called flossing, because the last time that I cut my thread, it was about out to here. So there's a thread underneath there that is that long. So I'm going to take this and wrap it around my finger and pull my needle thread out longer and simply use that to floss that thread to bring it up so I can get a hold of it and pull it out. So it makes it easier than having to go and use other tools. This is a technique that long armors have used for a long time. So I'm going to set this needle back down dead center. And as I said, this is going to be my, now maybe I'm backwards on that. Got to look at my picture again. Maybe the long ones are the ones that go up and down. Yeah, they are. So anyway, I was backwards on that. I'm going to be doing these diagonal ones. The red ones are going to be my 5.5. So I'm pulling that thread out of the way. Now let me tell you something about this type of a template. If I am using this template, there is just a little tiny bit of space back and forth. So whenever I'm using a template that has an opening like this, I need to stay pushing towards the same side, or I will get 2 lines almost close to each other, but they will not be one right on top of each other. So when I go around this and I get back to here, I'm going to go into the opening, but I'm still pushing to that side. So that way I get a nice spot like that. I'm coming over here. You notice I skipped the green line. And again, I'm going to rotate so that you can see a little bit more of it. I could actually go all the way around and never move my fabric, but it would be making it difficult for you to see that. I hope you guys, if you've never done this, or if you're just getting started, I want you to realize if you get your machine set up correctly, this is very relaxing. It is fun to do. I am not a free motioner. That's totally something that I don't do well at. And this I simply enjoy. It's just so much fun. So what did I do? I just skipped the wrong line, it looks like. Well, shoot. I wish I hadn't have done that. Glad it's not a real project. So what would you do in this case? Well, what you would do is you would get that seam ripper and back out what you did and did incorrectly. So in this case, I'm going to finish this, but what I did is I did 2 side by side and then I skipped 1. So this one, and this one are all wrong. I'm not going to take the time to take those out for you guys because you don't want to sit here and watch me rip, and unfortunately this is live. It's not like we can put that in fast forward. But then I will have this at the bottom side will be what it's supposed to look like. So in this case, I shouldn't have been telling you how much fun I have with this, and I should have been paying attention. Okay, so I'm going to go back here and do this one because that one would be correct. And then I'm going to come to this green one, but before I start, I take out the long piece that's at the bottom here, and I adjust it to where it's at 7.5. And you might want to even make yourself a little note, 7.5 is on the green, or whatever color you do when you're doing it, so you don't mess up like I did.
They're just glad to see that you're human.
Well, that's definitely true. Some mistakes you just can't hide. You're just going to have to rip them out. That's why you want to color code it. I'm going to go ahead and do another one here where it's supposed to be. And I'll just cut this thread since I've already kind of messed it up. I won't continue on. But then you can see outside of this, that's what it should be. Long, short, long, short, long, short. And the long one points down to our border. It stops about 3/8 to 1/2 inch above that. So this is going to have 12 of these on here. And I'm going to teach you TempLee quilting here on the next thing. You could actually have put a picker fabric behind this, and the way I'm going to show it to you, and then you could be cutting these out. Another thing you could do is you could put some crystals in these since it's a snowflake. Again, when the lines are gone, you can see how much nicer that looks just to have those lines gone from there. So that's the way, except for this part, that's the way your snowflake should be done. So again, you're going to measure up from where the border is, which will already be on yours. You're going to measure up 4 inches, and you can see how nice this fits in here. This one here would have been out this far, so it fits right in that space. So I would then move to the next one over here, and I would be measuring up my 4 inches, using my 6-point crosshair and putting those lines in there, and paying attention to which ones I was on so that wouldn't happen again.
That's okay. Sharon said that all snowflakes are unique. So
Well, that one is definitely unique. So thanks, Sharon, for giving me that little extra boost there.
And Liz reminded us of a Bob Ross happy little accidents.
Happy little accidents. Okay. Well, now what we're going to be doing is I am going to take my one that actually has this all together, and before I put it on, because I have only got, you can see 2 of these, I'm going to show you how this is going to be set up. Now this would all be done right on your fabric, but this way it's going to be a little less cumbersome and not so much in the way when you're working to see this. What I'm going to do is I am going to move down to my cutting table where I think it's going to be a little easier for you to get an idea of what we're doing here. So I am taking this piece and I'm flipping it back to the back. Well, first I'm going to take a straight pin and mark the center. And the reason I'm using a straight pin rather than a mark is because I need to see it on the other side. So I'm going to take this and measure to the middle because I know where the middle is. You're going to Yours may be just a bit different, so you're going to make sure that you get it in the right place. It should be about 7 inches. And so now I've got that pin there. I'm going to come to the next one, and I'm going to do the same thing. And you can see all I'm doing is I'm sticking it in to my seam line. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this over, and it's very well explained in diagrams in your instructions. So I'm going to skip to that page so you can see what I'm talking about. You will have a template in here that you are going to need to cut 12 pieces of Heat and Bond Light, or possibly 24. If your fabric that peeks out does not have a fusible on the back already, you're going to need an additional 12. And the reason I'm showing you this is because this is the fabric that I'm going to use. It's the glitter fabric. You can get this a lot of places. If you have a store that sells Kimberbell, they have it. We have some of these. If you need to give us a call, we have several different colors. I'm going to do 2 of these in blue and 2 of them in the white. Now you can see the little shine there. That is got the front on it so that is protecting it. And the whole idea of that is you could run it through like an AccuQuilt cutter and cut this out. We are just cutting it with a rotary cutter or even just scissors. But what you're going to do before you actually use this is after you cut it, you peel that front off. And you're just going to pitch this, okay? You don't do anything with that. That just gets pitched. So I have these with fusible on the back. So I don't, in other words, it came that way. I don't have to do anything. But if yours needs a fusible, because you don't have to use glitter fabric, you can just use a different color of fabric, you would need to, on the back of this, put something fusible. I like Heat and Bond Light, so that's on there so it can be fused, okay? So that template is going to be 12 of your peaking fabric and 12 Heat and Bond Light, unless you need to add one to the back. So how do we know where and how to do this? Well, I've got my mark right here. And in your instructions, that's what I was going for to show you when I got stopped there. In your instructions, it shows you in this picture here, you are going to measure up 2 1/8 inches to know where this goes. Now, it's going to be 4 inches over and 2 1/8 inch up. So what we're going to do is I'm going to measure this 4 inches over. There's my 0. Here's my 4 inches. And then I need to measure up 2 1/8 inches. So I'm going to take my ruler from the seam line, and again it's well explained, and I'm going to put another pin 2 1/8. Why did that happen that way? Well, that's where the center is going to be when we do this. And at this point, you're just going to take one of the Heat and Bond Lights, and I recommend you just mark a center this way and a center that way. Now you can actually go 2 diagonals. It's all still going to give you the center. And if you will take your pen and put it dead through that, right in that spot, we're on the wrong side of the border. And we are going to now measure that 2 1/8. This is kind of like a little whirligig. It just makes it easier. Put it at 2 1/8. And then it doesn't matter if this pin comes out. And you are going to set that on there so that this edge is parallel with the bottom edge seam. And this gets pressed in place. Now I got some bad habits, and that was one of them. And we're not going to do it completely, but since I didn't have it on my mat, I wanted to hold it in place. So that gets pressed in place. Do not rip that backing off yet. Don't rip that backing off. So now I go to the other one over here. Here, my center is my pen. I'm going to measure over again 4 inches, and I put a pin there. My board even helps hold that in place. And remember, I said to take one of your heat and bond pieces, and I'm simply going to draw my line across there. And I can do corner to corner on just 2 lines. And that will give me the center of my hexagon. So I'm going to take one of the pens dead through the center there, set my ruler so that it's on the seam line, not at the bottom edge, on the seam line, straight up. Take that point of the pen and put it right, oops, moved it, don't want that to happen, at 2 1/8 inch, and I can just set this straight down in that board and put that down flat, and all I need to do before I release it is to make sure that this edge is parallel with that bottom. And now I'm going to press that in place. Now I would do that on all 6 sides. I'm not going to take the time to do that. You got the hang of it. It's in the instructions. It's very well shown. And so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave that there because I still need it. I've got my backing and my batting already secured so that you can see how this is going to work. Now it would be a much bigger piece, but I'm simply going to be putting this on so that I have at least 2 inches of my batting or my backing hanging over, and just a little bit. I don't like to go right to the edge because something may shift or move, but you want a little bit of that there. So I'm going to set this down, and I'm going to remove that pen and reposition it. Because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you that you're going to want to secure your top portion. You would have already had this done because you would have done the stars on this one. Now you can either use the spray, or we have something called Free Fuse that is new. And it comes in a little shaker. It's an Alex Anderson product. And what you do is you take off the shaker, you empty out the powder, you put it in the shaker, and then all you have to do is a little salt on there. You lay your top back and you fuse it in place. Well, just because I want to do it quickly, I'm going to use the spray. I do not normally do that in the house, but I wanted to get it done, so I'm going to do that there for you. This is not fused. We don't want to fuse this yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this over so I can get this nice and flat. And you can see right there, it puckered a little bit. And I'm going to come over here and put it right on the back of that white, making sure my seam allowance is down towards my blue. And this is still loose. I keep emphasizing that because that has to be still loose. Because now what I'm going to do is, this has the front peeled off of it. Okay, that front piece that I had, I guess I've already lost it to the floor. What I need to do is, it doesn't matter. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lay this on here. You can see that like that, but I need it to be this way. And all I'm going to do is hold on to that and fold it back so that it's still right underneath there. And I'm going to take my iron and I'm going to fuse that to the batting. that will actually be fused to the batting. So when I do this, I am fusing that little extra peeker fabric to my batting. Now when I lift this up, it stays right on my batting. I'm going to come over to this spot. I need another one on the back of this. How about just for fun we do a blue one so we can see what they look like. So I'm putting the wrong side to me because that's going down here. And if this was a piece of fabric that doesn't have a fusible, you would have fused heat and bond and removed the paper on this, but not this. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay that down. Make sure that it's right behind there. Take up this corner and check it. And I'm going to fuse that to the batting. So now when I lift this up, that's fused in place. So what's the next step? Well, the next step is we are not doing any ironing from now on. No more ironing. We would have done all of those around there. We've done all 12. Let's pretend we have. So I am pulling off the heat and bonds backing so that when we're completely done, we will be able to fuse that in place so it will not be, the raw edges will not be tempted to fray out. So no more ironing until we're finished. So iron, don't be tempting me. Now, again, this is going to be very easily written diagrams showing you everything. You are going to draw a line a 2 1/8 inch from your border. Remember, we used 2 1/8 inch when we placed that center. So we're going to lay this on here, and I'm just going to come down just a smidge because I can pretty much tell what 1/8 is. And I'm going to get my marker, and I'm going across here. So I'm across there. Do we have any questions while I'm doing this? I'm dead center right here. And I'm going to use a line on my ruler to line up with my seam to come down. And just so you can see, right here's where it's telling us how to do this. It's the same measurements that we've already used because that's how we found the center of where we needed to place those pieces on the back. So I'm going to get my crosshair grid. Thank goodness for rolling chairs so I can easily roll over there and get it. And on this one we only need 6 lines. But the thing that I want you to notice is when you put those on there, we don't want one straight up. They are going to go so that there's one straight on the line. So that way that we can make sure that we don't get it in the wrong place. Otherwise, the next step will not line up at all. So, I'm glad this is all archived because I'm sure that some of you are going to want to go back and watch it again if you've never done essentially reverse applique. We call it TempLee quilting because we're using templates. But it is essentially reverse applique. So now we're ready to stitch. So we're going to come over to the sewing machine. And we're going to be using the Spinifex 8 in the 3 1/2 inch size. Now this particular one has the option to use a hole, but we're not going to be using it. So what we're going to do is we are going to set our foot and our needle dead center. I am going to pull up that thread by raising my needle, raising my foot, pull up the thread, get a hold of that, and pull it out, set it back in place, and needle down. I can hold on to this, and all I'm going to do is out the top of the template, there's a straight line. I'm going to hug up against the foot because your foot and template always have to be together. Probably could have changed this thread, but then you couldn't have seen the design, and I don't want that. I'm going to move this back out of my way. Oh, you guys, this is so much fun. I'm hoping to do another one where we'll have some fast projects, or let's just say quick projects that you could do for some gift giving. So just keep tuned in to our site so that you'll know. The Facebook site for Sew Study, that's where we announce everything. Now I simply cut that. I would secure it, but for the demo, I'm going to go ahead and just cut it. Look at that design there. I'm trying to get it where you can see it. I'm not sure where that is. So I'm going to go ahead and set this in there, and because I cut that thread, I really don't need to pull it up. If this happens to you like I just did, you're just going to open your gate. Make sure that you have stable tape on your templates. I met so many people this weekend that had templates and said they aren't having success, but they never were told to use stable tape, which surprised me. But the stable tape is this that's on the back that grabs onto the fabric to keep your templates from sliding. Now I'm just going to cut this thread out of the way. And if you have measured everything correctly, we're going to easily do this next step. So I'm going to go ahead and again just cut this. And this should be from the center out to oh my goodness, it is. It's supposed to be from that point to the center 2 1/4 inches. And it is. So all I need to do is know that that's my starting spot for my next one. Now just so you'll be able to see it, I'm going to put a little X right there on the end. And I'm going to be using my heart template, and it happens to be the 3-inch heart, and it's not going to look anything like a heart when we do it because I'm going to use it as a connector. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this heart and I'm going to set it in this position if we're moving from left to right so that the big end is towards the center. And so I'm going to come in here and I'm going to set my foot down right at that spot where I marked it. Remember, I would pull my threads up and all that, but for the demo I'm not going to. And I'm going to push this in to that edge, and this center line here will line up, or this line right here will line up with our center line. Now what I'm going to do is I'm only going to stitch down and around until I get right back on that center line. Now I have like one more stitch to go, but I'm not going to do that because I'm right on that center line. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to flip it over. So again, the big side is in the center, the line is here, and over here, believe it or not, if everything's done correctly, when we finish, our needle will be right in that spot. So I'm creating a loop, and right there is the last stitch. And I'm just going to cut it for the demo. So you can see that we have that connector right there. So that's what's going to be between here. And then I'm going to move over here, and we are going to pretend that we have designs over here, because I want you to see how this is going to line up. So I need to draw this. And we want to get it accurate. Remember, that was 2 1/8 inches down from the top. So this spot right here should be from the edge 2 1/4, and it is. So I'm going to put a spot over here at 2 1/4, because even though we don't have a design over there, we would have. And what we're going to use as our connector this time is the same thing, only in the corner it looks more like it was mitered. So I'm going to set the foot down. This line is going to be on the line that I drew, and I want this line over here to be coming straight out of that line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down, and I'm going to stop when I get to that spot right there, where it's right in that little seam. And I'm going to flip this around, and I'm going to line this up back over here and come down this way.
Carla loves your use of the heart as a connector.
Well, I didn't do the best connection there, because this should have come down here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, you know, live TV, that's what happens. I'm going to rip it out real quick, because I want to show you what it really should look like. So hey, what questions do I have? Any and all, anything to do with template quilting or quilting, because it's not going to take me long to rip this out. One of the things I will, while she's looking to see if you have questions, make sure you like and share and comment, because all week people can like and share, and on Friday we're going to be giving away to somebody a winter collection set of templates. No questions?
No.
Everybody went to supper. They're going to be watching me later, I guess. And for those of you that don't know, if you go back in the archives, we have a lot of free classes like this. We have one called Bless Your Hearts that is other different uses of the hearts template, so you could search through there, and those are free classes. We have one from Christmas that was called Christmas in July, and that project is on there.
Yes, Janice, if you go to the very beginning of this video, we took a picture of the whole project. I'm sure when we're done, we'll take another one, but it is at the very beginning of the video.
Good question, because it's obviously not in teal and light blue and white, but that was the best way to show you guys how to do that on the screen there. So,
and Sandy, if you think of a question after we're done, even if it's another day or later this week, just go ahead and plop a comment down here at the bottom, and we'll go back to it. Even if the video's not live, we'll get those.
Because if you put that on there, it lets us know that there are questions there. So that just that quickly, I pulled that out. And if you're worried about those holes, once I press it, it will be fine. But just remember, I told you, this is one we can't press until we're totally finished. So let's just start this again and put our needle down there. And again, remember, the small end is this way. I want to line this up. And I flip it around. And I'm going to come back down here and stop where I cross my seam and then line this back up so that it comes right back to where I want it to. There we go. So I got right back to where I wanted, and I've got the little miter here on this corner. So again, I'm just going to cut so that you can see this. And now we're going to have some magic, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to take our seam ripper and we're going to feel in underneath here. And if I can feel that it's just like one layer, because I can run my, you couldn't hear this, but I can feel that glitter fabric. So I'm just going to take a slice in there. And then I'm going to get my snips that are called 4.5-inch snippies. Famore makes a pair and Havel makes a pair. And they look like this, and I can tell you before I finally found these, I did not care to do template quilting because it was not easy. But these make it so super easy. So I'm going to go stick that point in there, and all I'm going to be doing is trimming right up to almost the stitching. You want a little bit of space left, but right to that stitching. I'm going to turn it. When I'm actually doing this, I don't sit at the sewing machine. I sit at a big table so I can just work my way right around that. And for those of you that were wondering, you still have that fusible on the back there. And so when we're completely finished, we'll be fusing that down so that those raw edges are not going to unravel.
Oh, Alice, this would be really pretty for a tree skirt. That's what she wants to try this on.
You can certainly do that. Now, you notice I almost picked that up thinking I was going to do that. Get yourself a good sharp seam ripper. You don't have to cut them all out, but in this one I like them all cut out. Just get that underneath there, and I just take the time to start them. I didn't even get clear down on that one. There we go.
What's this technique called again?
TempLee quilting. We are doing what we call TempLee quilting. It's a template, and because Leonie West kind of started this, her name is Leonie, but she goes by Lee, so that's why it's TempLee. So I'm going to come up over here and cut out. I didn't get through the backing on that one. I didn't get that cut. There we go. I'm anxious to try this with 3 layers. So you could have one that you cut out the top layer, and then the next one maybe you could cut out both layers. So you would have 2 peeker fabrics. I hope you don't mind me calling them peeker fabrics. I didn't know what else to say. They peek out. So you can see how this comes out from underneath there. Now I'm just going to jump over here to the blue one because I'm kind of excited to see how that looks.
Let's try a little game. If you have tried this, give us a thumbs up. If you are wanting to try this technique, give us a love. Let's see how many of you have done this and how many are thinking about doing it now. Oh, we've got lots of hearts coming our way. Keep them coming. There's about a dozen so far who now want to try this.
Well, it's a lot of fun, and it's not hard at all. And for example, on this one right here, remember I can't press anything until I'm completely finished. I really want to because I want to press those lines out because those lines make it so it's not nearly as attractive. But I can't press anything until I'm completely finished. So I've got one more thing to show you, but you can see how you can do this, and we'll show you the finished project here in a minute because obviously that one is really pretty, but that's how we do that. Now the next thing I want to show you is how we finish this edge because it's really not difficult at all. Now you could go over to the rotary cutter, which is what I'm going to do. So we're going to go back over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my backing completely out from underneath my batting. So I'm going to take this side and I'm going to fold this back so that that's completely back underneath there. And then I'm going to get my long ruler. I have so many rulers. It's so surprising how many rulers we can have. But I'm going to get my long ruler and I'm going to cut my batting off. Now remember, you don't see any backing here. I got that out of the way. So I'm cutting this off so that it's even here. And then I'm going to flip this batting or backing out. And all I want left on there is 1.5 inches. So I'm going to measure on the edge there my 1.5 inches. And I'm going to cut right along there. So I would do this to all the sides, and I have to do it to the 2 sides that I have here, or I can't even show you this technique. So I'm going to now repeat what I just did. So I'm going to turn the backing back. Now this side's not quilted, so I got to be a little bit more understanding with it because it's not holding together. But the backing is turned back. And I'm going to cut that. Are we in the eye shot of them? Mm-hmm. Okay. We're going to cut this along here so that I have cut that and now I'm going to flip my backing back out. Too many B's. I guess I'm all mixed up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure from there 1.5 inches. Some of you have used my binding tool before, and if you have, again, give us a thumbs up so we know who has worked with that. So what I'm going to be doing now is just showing you on this one corner how we work with this. So this is what the packaging looks like for the tool, and this is what the tool looks like. Now you may have used the original one, which was for a right angle. This one is for hexagons and octagons, and the way you know which one you've got, well, it's labeled on here, but most of us don't like to read all of that. I just take these lines and line it up and see. Well, that's not correct because that's off up there. But this one's going to work because it's the exact same angle. So as soon as I prepare my fabric, we'll lay that tool back on there and we will show you how it's done.
That tool is in Ellen's stocking, or at least that's what she's asked Santa for Christmas.
Well, great. She's going to love it. What we do at this point is we turn this, and of course this is on the bias. And anytime you're working with something on bias, you don't want to just start pressing here and press to this end. You want to press where you start. So hopefully we're still warm with our iron. And I'm just pressing that binding, because it is really going to be our binding. I'm pressing it up so it meets that edge. And then I'm going to move this down, and I'm going to make sure that I get this turned straight in. Like I said, we don't want to iron that. We want to press it. And I would go all the way around the quilt that way. So I've got this side here to do. And because of the way this lays on the fabric, this is on straight a grain. So this one's going to lay a little bit better for us. So we could probably use the long edge of the iron, but we're still pressing. So we're just pressing that down. Now I've got a little fun that we're going to add into this, and that's why when you look at this, it looks like I've got my design too close to the top here. But that's because what we're going to be doing is taking a trim, which I call a flat piping, and we are going to cut a 2-inch piece by 22 inches, fold it in half so that the right sides are out, and we're just simply going to lay it in there. Now you can see I've got it over here and it's overlapping, so I've got to get some scissors, and I'm going to cut that off so that it is at that same angle. And I'm going to lay it back in there. And when we finish, that's going to come out like that. But I'm not ready for that yet. So I need to take my tool and hang with this. We're really close to being finished. I'm going to take this tool, lay it at that angle, and at this point, I like to have a very fine line. So I really don't like using one of those markers. So I want to find one of my finer points. Here we go. And I'm going to make a little finer line at that angle. And then I simply take that and mark in the fold where it crosses the line I drew. At this point, we are going to take our whole piece and turn it back on itself. And this is going to get lined up like that. And through that intersection, and let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, it's all in pictures because I'm a visual learner. So in the instructions for that Quick Easy Miter binding tool, the dual angle version, it is all lined out in pictures. So I'm going to put this down to the fabric so that it's through both of those points and pull this back. So I've got just a small bit of stitching to do from here to there and back. So let's go over here. Now would be a good time to ask some questions if you need to, because I got to put my regular foot back on and get ready to stitch. So here we go. And very quickly we will have that binding turn from the back to the front and a mitered corner. So I'm going to go ahead and put my regular foot back on here. My machine should be set back for regular stitching. On this part, again, I'm simply using that 2.0 length. I would change my needle from the top stitch needle. And I'm going to set this in here, set the foot down, and you're going to want to get real close in on this because I want to make sure that we don't stitch past that point. So I'm coming to the corner. Right there is where those threads, I did not go over that needle, or that straight pin, I stopped right there. And so now what I'm going to do is I have a consistent reverse, so I'm just pressing that button, going right back on the line. When I get to the fold, I remove that reverse and come back to the middle. And then I can just cut this off. I'm going to use my point turner. I'm going to check the back to see that I stitched right on the line I intended to. And got so many scissors and I don't have anything right here. I'm just going to cut that, and then I'm going to cut a little tiny triangle off there because that's going to take the heaviness out. I'm going to lay it back on its right side, and when I flip this back, have some fur. I'm going to use my point turner, and I'm going to put that mitered point right out. And you'll notice that this now just wants to lay right up there and right up here. So what I will do is, before I work on towards that, I'm going to set this back in here. I'm going to get my pins. And this is kind of going to be easier if you do like a little bit of a two-pinning process. I'm going to lay this one here and pin that in place. And we don't have to sew all of this together, so I'm just going to put that like so. And I have another piece over there. I'll just cut this off and make my other piece. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay it right on top. We don't have to do any joining or anything because the end is hidden down in underneath there. And so I'm just laying that in place so it overlaps. And now what I will do is put this pin in place and come this way. And just that easy, we have finished our edge with a faux binding. We didn't have to make any add-on. And in my opinion, the best part is I can do this by machine and I don't have to do any handwork. Now, I'm not opposed to handwork, but if I can do something that actually looks better than if I did it by hand and it finishes up my project, that's what I want to do. So each side of this has its own little trim piece. And you can see, because it's hidden down in here, I don't have to worry about joining it. I just overlap it. And now I'm going to either use my blind hem foot, or if you have a machine that has what's called a left edge top stitch foot, and I do, I'm going to take that off. I'm going to be using a narrow zigzag. And I'm leaving this thread in, but honestly, if I was doing it, I would be matching my thread. I don't want to see this stitching if I don't have to. So I would be matching the thread. Now on this foot, you might need to get right down in there to see it, but there's a little red line right at the front. And that's where the edge of my fabric goes, right in line with that line. And I'm going to be using a narrow zigzag. And because of that line, it's right in the center position. And I'm going to let it set up like it normally wants to. But I am going to change the length just to make it a smidge longer, and the width to make it just a little bit narrower. So when I'm stitching down on this, it's going to go like off the edge and back on. Now this is going to look a little bit obnoxious because of the fact that I'm using a colored thread, but if it matched, it wouldn't look that way. And then when I get to the corner here, I'm going to just turn, but I want you to see that I can go even narrower and have a smaller stitch. So it's totally up to you. When I get to the end, I'm going to go around this corner. I don't sew over pins, and I don't recommend that you do either because it damages both the pins and it's not good for the needle. So now the last thing that we have to do, I'm just going to cut this because we've gone far enough.
We have a question. Could you use a decorative stitch instead of zigzag?
You certainly could. You certainly could, but you can see what that looks like so that that's finished that up, but if it matches, it won't even show like that. So I'm going to go right underneath you here. And I'm going to set this on here. And now we can press this. We can press this. I'm not going to press all of it because I still want to cut out here. And if I did, I would be pressing that down. But when we press up around here, that's going to take that raw edge and press it to our fabric. But with this exposed, you may want to take the little slip of paper that was on there and lay that over it so that when you press it, you're not putting the heat onto your extra fabric. So I hope that has taken you from beginning to end to show you what we need to know to be able to do our project. And we'll end with the fact that you can see there what the white on white. I added a crystal. That's a hot fix crystal. And let's zoom in on a couple of these up here in this so that they can see the snowflake. Don't hesitate to ask questions even after we're off the air. I really appreciate you joining me today so that we could show you how to do TempLee quilting and also how to use the quick easy mitered binding tool for those dual angles. And we will have the handout up, I know, on the SewBiz site and the Sew Steady Facebook site within the next half hour. So thank you for joining me. I really appreciate the opportunity to show you how to do some of these projects.